Jen.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, welcome to the show. Fun fact about Jen: the last time she went skydiving about 10 years ago, her chute wouldn't open up, which I don't blame was the reason why it was her last time. She tells me that the buzzer was going off, and just in time that she was able to open the reserve chute. How scary was that?
Probably the most terrifying thing ever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
never skydiving again, ever.
Yeah, hit the ground and said no more.
No doubt, no doubt. So I like to start. Do you want to give a shout out to anybody?
um, no, because then if I forget someone, then feelings are going to be hurt. So, no.
All right, fair enough. We'll take it at that. So. One way I like so the way I like to start every episode off is what's one thing you're grateful for today and why?
I think the biggest thing that I'm grateful for today is being completely comfortable being by myself. And I used to never be able to be alone. It was the most uncomfortable feeling, place, anything, and now I absolutely love it. I mean, not that I don't ever get lonely, but I really enjoy my solitude now.
Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome. So what I like to ask here too is just for an introduction is do you want to share with the listeners what your childhood upbringing was like?
Sure. I'm an only child. Um my parents got together I think about a year or so before I came about, and my father was an alcoholic and an addict, and my mother was his enabler, and we had a very um, um, it was a very abusive household. Lots of drugs, lots of alcohol, lots of screaming, lots of yelling, lots of hiding. Um, and I was always really confused in school and stuff like that when the other kids would be like, "Oh, you're an only child. You must get spoiled so much," and that I didn't understand that because it was more. I got all the shit and abuse, so it wasn't a very fun place.
You know what I was just thinking, being an only child versus being the oldest when you mentioned that, I'm like as the oldest I was a trial and error kid, but I guess you would be too as an only child and it never really dawned on me that until just now.
Yeah,
You get to go through the same shit as the oldest
and the youngest,
and the youngest,
and the
and
middle.
this
Yeah.
is true. So at what age did you ever have your first drink or drug?
Uh, the youngest that I can remember, I want to say, is probably about 5 or 6 years old, and I remember my parents had a Halloween party, and I can't remember who, but they let me take little shots of vodka out of the caps of the vodka bottles, and I just remember that warm feeling and loving it, and I most of my childhood is quite a blur to me, but I don't know if it was that occasion or if it was just something I kind of always did at parties. But I remember my mom used to drink B-52 shooters. I don't know if you know what those are, but
Yep.
um, I used to always drink the very bottom of them, and I always loved that warm feeling that I got in my throat. You know, so that would be my earliest memories.
Okay. Was school an issue for you at all?
Uh, I was straight A's, honors, um, but if I wasn't, if things weren't absolutely perfect at school, then I was I was in trouble at home. And it didn't matter how good things were going at school. If there was one teeny tiny little problem, there was usually hell to pay for whatever that was.
It's kind of shitty.
Yeah.
At what age were you when you uh at what age were you when you took your first drink willfully or drug willfully on your own accord? You know?
I think I think I would have to say probably about 13 or 14. Um, as a child, I used books. That was my escape. Um, and I always looked at my father and the things that he did as things that I would never do. I never wanted to be that person. Um, And so I think like smoking pot was probably the first thing I really did, you know, willfully, because that's what all the other kids were doing, and I wanted to be a part of. I didn't want to be weird and not do what they were doing. Um, and I honestly didn't even really like it, but that's what everybody else was doing, and I needed I needed more than anything to belong, so I just did it.
Makes sense to me. I
Yeah.
get it. Yeah. Yeah. Seeking that attention or whatever, you know what? That's welcoming, right?
Yeah.
Like to be, yeah, welcome for who you are at that time or who we want them to believe we are, right? Kind of goes a long way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't want anybody to ever know who I actually was. I needed to present myself in this certain way, you know, and if that meant I had to smoke pot, then I was smoking pot.
Makes sense. It's funny the things we learn today, looking back, like at behaviors and having to wear that mask for acceptance, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, how's the progression, or did things progress, over high school, I guess, time frame?
I had a very drastic turning point in my life. I think right up until I turned 16, I would call myself a quote unquote normal sort of kid, except that I always had honors. Um, I was a jock. I was on every single team, and despite only being 4'11", I was also on the basketball team because I had to be. I I I had to do everything, right? And but I also smoked pot, right? So, I never really fit in with any group in particular, but I didn't not belong to all the groups, if that makes sense. Um, and then it was 4 days before my 16th birthday, and I was dating an older guy. He was about to turn 18, and he was murdered, and that was a huge turning point for me in my life. And he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he actually got murdered by a drug dealer, and of no fault of his own. um, but after that happened, I think I stayed in bed for a couple weeks, and I had no idea how to deal with that at all. And I remember my father, in a rage, came down to my room and told me I had to get over my shit and get myself together and go to school and whatever. And so I dragged my sad little ass to school the next day, and there used to be a pool hall. I used to go to St. Joe's, and there was a pool hall right around the corner, which is ironically a daycare now. And they used to sell beer there for $2 a bottle. And I got really drunk that day, and it stopped hurting so much. And that was a very pivotal day for me. Things changed that day.
How old were you?
I just turned
16. You
16. Yeah.
just said that. Yeah, you're 16.
Yeah.
Um, were you ever allowed to talk about feelings at home or express feelings?
Absolutely not. No.
Yeah, different generation, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, we didn't talk about as a child. I was very very selective on when I would cry because I had to use my tears to my advantage. Um, I mean, I was a tiny little girl, and my father was very physically abusive, and so I would have to gauge how drunk he was or how angry he was before I would turn on the tears, and I could only push it so far before he would stop and realize that he had actually hurt me. So I got really, really good at controlling feelings and how they looked.
it sucks that we have to like manipulate our parents, so to speak, right? Um, how was the progression from the age of 16, like getting into drinking? Um, did you go hard on the drinking? Did you get into the drugs?
Uh, I kind of went through just kind of whatever was thrown my way. I did it. It didn't really matter to me. I ended up dropping out of school. I ended up getting in trouble with the law. Um, anything and everything I would do drug wise and drinking. And then shockingly at 17 I got pregnant. And so I stayed sober because I was pregnant, because that's what you were supposed to do. And I think um, I was early enough in my addiction that it wasn't hard at that time to stay sober.
Makes sense. Progression wise, so you had your child at 18,
Hmm.
I'm guessing, or around
Just
that.
before I turned 18, yeah.
Okay. Um, how was life after that? When did you get introduced to the hard drugs?
Um, I did the single mom thing for the first couple years, and I probably didn't start drinking again until my son was about a year, maybe a year and a half old. Um, there was actually another pivotal day where I remember picking him up from daycare, and I was going home and past the same liquor store that I had passed many, many times. And the thought popped in my head of maybe a six pack would help pass the evening away, because again, I wasn't fitting in anywhere. Um, I was, I managed to finish high school. I was going to Grand McEwen. Um, there was no other mums my age. Um, I didn't fit in at the park or at the daycare because all the mums were like my mother's age. And I was very lonely, right? And so um, I remember having that thought one day of, maybe a couple drinks in the evening will just help with being alone. And so my drinking got quite heavy um, for a couple years, and I don't honestly, drugs never really became a part of my life until about 23, 24 years old. And when they did, they came fast and hard. Um, I'd met my daughter's dad, and I was very naive then. And he used to take off for like 4 or 5 days at a time, and he'd have all these really weird excuses of where he was going and what he was doing, and his cars were always breaking down in small towns, and I didn't I was oblivious. And anyway, long story short, we were living together up north, and my drinking was very, very heavy at this point. And he came home one day and he was supposed to bring a bunch of alcohol for me. And he only brought a six pack, and he had drank in one of them. And I was furious because what am I supposed to do with 5 beers? And he had a handful of crack cocaine. And he said, "Why don't you try this?" And those 5 beers lasted about a week.
Well,
And it was a hard, hard downhill slide from there.
do you remember that experience, like first time trying it?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I can still remember it to this day. It was the best feeling ever, honestly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to try and like describe that for us?
Whew. I feel like it's supposed to be like, as a recovered addict, it's supposed to be a gross, nasty feeling, but it wasn't. It was. I felt light as air. I felt like it's very hard to describe. Just free of everything. There's no pain, there's no confusion, there's no, I don't know. It's an absolutely beautiful feeling, and it lasted for probably about 15 seconds. And then I chased
Funny
that
enough.
for years. Yeah.
Yeah, like the reason why I ask is because I remember my first time, and speed was my drug of choice, right? Like
Yeah.
crystal, well, it was speed back then, which turned to crystal meth. But I remember doing it and not knowing what the high was, but laying in my bed, just staring at the ceiling, and it was 2 in the morning, and I'm like, I don't understand why people pay for this. Like, I feel normal,
Oh, really?
Yeah, and looking back, the whole scariest part of it is I felt normal. It made me feel okay. Like that's how I was meant to feel, right? And
Mm,
fucking game over after that, right?
yeah.
What was the progression like after that? Or what were some bottoms that you kind of? went, or share with us some. Can you share with us some of the, I don't know, maybe the shitty situations before getting to recovery for the first time, or your introduction to recovery?
Uh, I mean, there's a whole handful of them. Um, I never wanted to be my father, um, and I became exactly him. I was a very, very mean, um, evil drunk. I absolutely hated men when I was drinking, and I drank all the time. But I constantly had to have men around me. Um, Shockingly, I had daddy issues. um, I had I was really good. I was really, really good at manipulating men and pushing them to the point where they would get violent with me. Um, and then, of course, being the victim in the situation, you know,
Yep.
um, and not even understanding that until years later that um, that's what I knew, right? That was actually what was comfortable for me, and just creating all this chaos. I never knew that I loved chaos, but I absolutely thrived on it. I had to have it. Um, so yeah, I managed to get myself beat up pretty bad a few times, and not saying that it was all my fault. I mean, I definitely picked some really good men, um, but I was definitely a contributor to the situations that I was in. And I played the victim a lot of times, right? Losing jobs, even though I didn't show up half the time, and then my son, he went through a lot too, and I was very, very hard on him. My expectations for him were very, very high, um, and it took me many years to realize that I was doing to him exactly what my father had done to me. Um, but yeah, I can't even tell you, probably 6, 8 times I ended up in the psych ward. Um, Suicidal a lot. Of course, I was never honest with doctors, right? Because I never told them how much I drank or used. Just that I was feeling suicidal, and I was hearing voices or all these kinds of things, and how is a doctor supposed to properly diagnose me when I'm not giving them the whole truth?
Mhm.
Um,
In that period of time, like, did you ever think drinking or drugs was affecting you or a contributing factor to this?
no, no, I thought the way that I drank and used was what everybody else did, because those were the people that I surrounded myself with. So my behavior in my mind was normal. And it was also what I grew up with, right? So I had nothing to compare it to. I thought it was normal.
I get that. I totally, like, show me your friends and I'll tell you what you're about. And, or you start to not compare, right? But you don't identify either, right? You're maybe not as bad, or, and other people are doing it. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
it's the normal, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, the comparing and not as bad, I definitely did that. At least I'm not doing this, at least I'm not doing that. At least, child welfare's not involved or whatever.
Yeah,
I was always just a little bit better than you in my mind.
I get it. Like, there was one guy that I always, like, the bar was here for him, right? And he used to speak in rhymes. Like, he couldn't have a normal conversation. It was always like busting a rhyme, everything that came out of his mouth. I'm like, I'm not that fucked up, like, and I don't mean to be mean, like, I'm not gonna say names or nothing, but yeah, like that was kind of like, well, I'm not that bad. I always compared, right?
Mhm.
You know, um, how old were you when you first got introduced to recovery?
So I believe I was 26 when I first went to treatment. Uh, we had a couples counselor or whatever, and I don't know. I got bold one day, and for whatever reason, my partner wasn't with me that day, and I just kind of blurted it out, and I said, I think I have a drinking problem. I wasn't going to tell her about the drugs, of course, and I said, I think I might want to go to like rehab or something. And so she set it all up for me. And in my mind, it was like on TV, where you go and you do the thing and then you live happily ever after. And I honest to God thought that's how it worked. And I remember packing to go to treatment, and like I packed all these books and some arts and crafts, and I'm thinking like this is going to be a 3-week vacation. And yeah, it was a little bit of an eye opener. And I was honest to God like pissed off when I got there. And I think the second day I was there was my first 12-step meeting, and there's all these people there and they're talking about you have to do this for the rest of your life. And I'm thinking, fuck no. No, not me.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm gonna just back it up 1 second. Where were you? Can you tell us? Can you explain to us what your life looked like prior to going to rehab?
You mean
Just kind of describe it, or yeah, like what was your life looking like when?
so uh at that time I had 2 kids and I had 3 stepkids, and my partner and I lived literally in a town of 200 and butt fuck nowhere, northern Alberta. I was the school librarian and I smoked crack on weekends and I drank full time, and I actually had bottles hidden in the school library in like the science department, not department, but like in the science section of the library, in the places where I knew the kids never took books out from.
Smooth.
So in my mind, like, look at me, I'm this super mom, and I stay home and I take care of kids, and I have this great part-time job where I'm involved in the school, and crackheads are crackheads. I just, have fun on the weekends. I was up here. Yeah.
Fair. I get it. I totally get it. Right. So, like we go back to like that compare thing, right? Like, I totally get that. Um, you said you were 26 when you went to rehab.
Hmm.
Okay. How long was rehab for?
It was 3 weeks. I went to Henwood here in Edmonton.
Okay. What'd you do when you got out, or?
So it was probably about a month or two before I went to treatment that my ex and I were having a garage sale, and I was digging through um, our shed that we had. Sorry, I kind of because I have to put it into perspective here. And I'm digging through the shed and I find this box, and in this box, I didn't know what they were, but I found all these key tags and these little coins and these books. And I remember my ex freaking out and like ripping this box out of my hands, and that's mine. That's none of your business. You know what I mean? So now I'm in treatment and I recognize these key tags and these coins and these books. And so I call him on the phone one evening when we're allowed to have phone time. And I asked him, were you in recovery before? And he gets really upset, like not angry upset, but very emotional upset. And he tells me, yes, he was in A&A for a whole lot of years and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, I promise when you get out, I'll quit and everything's going to be good. And then it's a week or so later, and he's acting very, very, very strange every time I call him, and then he's not answering my calls at all. And long story short, I find to come out that um, he's been smoking crack since the second I left. And by this time, um, uh, the children's mother has come and she's picked up all the children and gotten them out of the house or whatever, and he's an absolute freaking mess. And so now I don't know what to do and I don't know where to go, and I don't want to go home because I want to stay sober. Um, so I stay here in Edmonton, and I get myself into a woman's, um, I guess it's another treatment center, McDougall House. I don't know, a long term treatment center. And I had been introduced to 12 step fellowships while I was in um, treatment. And so I'm going to go into this 100%, right? Because now my partner is God knows what, I have to do this for my children now. And I pretty much jumped in like 100%. And I stayed here, and that's what I did.
Nice.
Yeah.
Such a clean date today.
No.
Fair enough. Just gotta ask, right? So
Nope.
okay,
No. So
let's get on that journey then.
sure. Um. So I jumped into a fellowship. I was part of Cocaine Anonymous, and I did everything that they told me to. When I got the book and I got the sponsor and I went through the steps and I was of service, um, and I did it all, and I did it like 100% for about 2 years, and it was, my mind's always fuzzy on timing, but it was very, very shortly before I got into a car accident where I remember having the thought one day of, I don't want to be like these old fucking guys sitting in the back drinking the coffee for the rest of my life. Like I'm too young, I'm like 28, 29 years old, however it was. And I was like, do I really want to do this for the rest of my life? And that was like the first time I'd ever really wavered, on recovery. And then shortly after that, I got into a pretty bad car accident, and I'm not blaming it on the car accident. Um, but when I went to the hospital and they said, we're going to give you a prescription for some Percocets and some Oxycontins, instead of saying, hey, I'm an addict in recovery, I was like, okay. And that was kind of the beginning of my big long relapse. And it was fine at first, and I was taking them as prescribed and all that good stuff. And then eventually I'm buying them on the street, and then eventually I can't find them anymore. And of all the things in the world, I ended up drinking cough syrup. That became my drug of choice for about 6 months. And I was drinking about 4 to 5 bottles of cough syrup a day.
I did that when I was 14.
Yeah?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Not the only one.
I did it when I was like 14. I just remember one time, like, I was like as red as a lobster. I just got this flush, and I just kept telling everybody I was as red as a lobster. And yeah, it's a trip that I was only the one time, and it's something I wouldn't do again. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're not the only one.
I think for me, it was I had run out of pills or whatever. And I had remembered like months ago when I had gotten sick that it gave me a little buzz, and I just needed something, anything to get me through now, and there was a bottle of cough syrup, and yeah, then I was on my way.
I drank the whole bottle.
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'm not the only okay.
Yeah, no.
All right. So from there, okay. I just kind of want to put a little bit of a timestamp on this one. So you went to the treatment when you were 26.
Mm-hmm.
How long did you stay sober for before you wavered on recovery or the car accident? And then
So I think I started like actually relapsing at about 2.5 years.
Okay.
But I never told anybody. And I always get choked up about this one because it's one of the hardest things I ever did. And I still have a hard time with it. But I stood in front of a crowded room of people, and I took a 3-year medallion, absolutely high as fuck. And there was a voice in my head that entire time screaming out, just tell them the truth. Because I was living in hell. But my ego was so big that I could not do it. And it was probably another 3-4 months after that, even before I finally got honest. And I thought that getting honest was gonna free me of it, and I was gonna be able to like jump back in. In my mind, I'm just gonna do recovery again, and my ego wouldn't let me. It was too hard. I couldn't admit that I'd fucked up. Because I'd been sponsoring women, and like back then in CA, having 3 years clean was like, that was a long time, and I just stopped going, and I stopped doing everything, and eventually I just said fuck it, and alcohol has always been it's been my main drug of choice. It's always been my favorite. And I was just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna go back to what I love. And so I did. And I still always thought, you know what? I can always go back. I don't have
Mm.
to let it get as bad as it was before. I can just go back. But I didn't realize that it was going to take me 7 years to do that.
Yeah. In that course period, so that's obviously what your clean date is now. Um, did you ever try quitting on your own over that period?
Yeah, I tried. I tried a whole bunch of times. Um, and I tell you, there's this like special little hell for us addicts. I think who've had recovery. When we have a belly full of booze or and a mind full of recovery. Um, that battle that we have to
Mm.
fight. You know, and there was so many times where I was like, I could quit. I could do this on my own. I know how to do this, but the obsession just wins. And I would tell myself, you know what, tomorrow I'll try again. Tomorrow I'll try again. Tomorrow I'll try again. And it's like it's like a dream sequence in a movie where it's like right there and you can reach out and touch it, but you can't. I don't know. And then there was a few years in there where I was doing a massive amount of cocaine, and somehow I managed to quit doing the cocaine on my own. Which, well, okay, I'll be honest about it. I started out doing really good cocaine, and then I like burnt so many bridges over a couple years that I was buying cocaine from like some 18-year-old in a little shitbox car. So I was really quitting baby laxatives. But I had convinced myself that I'm not really an addict though. If I can quit cocaine on my own, then I'm not an addict, right? So
Yep.
I can just keep drinking. It's fine.
Yep.
But yeah, I did the geographical change, and I moved all the way across the country, and I left my children here, and um I've never been like a super God person, um but there's no other way for me to explain it. And I just had one of those days where I wanted nothing more than to die, but was too chicken shit to kill myself, and just kind of dropped to my knees and was like, please just tell me what to do. And this voice just told me, you need to go back home, and you need to go back um, to your people, because I knew I had all these people that love me here. And like any good addict, of course, I kept doing what I was doing for about another month. But eventually I came back home to Edmonton, and then I waited another 3 weeks after I got here before I walked into a meeting. But yeah, my clean date now is April 9th, 2016.
Nice. So you're coming up on what is that?
I just took
16,
6
6 years.
years. Yeah.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, that first year coming back, where'd you notice the most area of growth in your life?
Uh Probably dealing with people. I'd spent so many years pushing people away. Um I mean, it's still something that I work at a lot. I'm always very conscious of it. And it's constantly a work in progress, but letting people in, and it's been huge for me. And it started out with women. I started developing relationships with women, which was something I'd never ever done before. Um, I mean, aside from all the recovery stuff, I'm very much a 12-step person. I do lots of service and my steps and all that kind of stuff. But that is the big thing, I think, was my relationships with people.
What was your big like? How did you start building those relationships? Like, what do you have to do to step out of your comfort zone to do that?
Honestly, just be super fucking uncomfortable. Like, smile, you know? It's smile when I don't want to smile, be nice to people when I didn't want to be nice. Do the small talk when I never wanted to do the small talk. Um, go for the shitty Chinese food after the meeting, you know? When somebody else asked me how I was doing, I would ask them back. And those were things I never did ever. Um, there's one thing that I've always told other people when they tell me that they're scared of people, because this one always worked for me. Um, events, whenever there's events going on, I would do the 50-50 tickets, because that way I'd have to talk to every single person that was there, but I only had to talk to them for like a minute, and then I could move on, and I would never have to talk to them again for the rest of the night.
I got some funny stories about that one. Getting uncomfortable at church, I had to go on the serve group, and they asked like, "Where do you want to serve?" I'm like, "With the people," because I struggle with small talk. Like I cannot for the life of me have. Well, I shouldn't say that. Like it's a work in progress. Small talk with strangers. Like when I don't know their name, I'm never gonna see them again. I'm like, what's the fucking point in this
Yep.
conversation? I struggle, and I can't. It's a work in progress, right? Um, I totally forget what else I was gonna.
The share circle.
The, pardon? Oh yeah,
Yeah.
about yeah, and also along that line of shared like meeting people or
Mm.
talking. I was really, and I was just telling somebody this the other day. I loved when my children were like 2 years old, right? So that way I could just follow them around at a birthday party, and I didn't actually have to socialize with people. I was kind of dreading them growing up older where they didn't need me anymore. And I was just making jokes about having more babies just so that I didn't have to deal with people, right? Every 3 years pop out a new, well, I can't pop out a kid, but have a new kid every 3 years. So I didn't have to socialize at birthday parties.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Could you imagine? Why do you have so many kids? Social anxiety.
Funny how that works, eh? What are some goals that you set when you first came around, like when you first got back in here? And what are some goals today you're working on?
So in the beginning, it was just real basic stuff. I mean, I got here with a backpack and my two dogs, so like I needed an apartment and I needed a job and I needed stuff and um, building my relationship with my children again, especially my daughter. She just turned 18 in September, so she would have been, I can't do math, 12 ish when I came back, and I had really put a huge strain on our relationship. So that was important to me. I wanted to make sure that I could do that, but I knew it was going to take time. And anyway, and I kind of put a timetable on those, like things that I wanted to do in my first year and stuff like that, and it's funny how recovery works, because like I'm like 3 months sober and I got all of that and more already, and it's like the rewards of recovery are piling faster than I can even think of them, and my goals today, which is really strange, I don't really seem to have a lot, because like so many of them they're fulfilled, right? I love traveling. I've been traveling a lot since I've been sober, um, which I've been doing. Um, I always wanted to get married. I got married. Um, then I separated, and then my husband passed away. Um, so technically, I can check that one off the list as successful.
True.
um, and I can laugh about it because we did have a really good relationship before he passed away, so it's okay. Um, I have a collection of animals at home. I have a collection of plants at home. Um, I live with my son. He's 26 years old. And not like in a weird way. He's a university graduate and all that stuff, but times are hard, right? And we're like roommates, so I kind of get the best of both worlds, where I'm close with my children, but um I still have me in my space. um I don't know. I'm going back to university. That's kind of a big thing.
Sure is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure is.
I'm 44 years old and I'm going back to school, which is absolutely terrifying.
It's probably been a while, eh?
A little bit, yeah.
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 Yeah. What are you going back to school for?
Social work.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's exciting.
It's kind of crazy.
I bet. I'm gonna ask you another question here. What are some relapse warning signs?
Um, for me, I think it was letting that judgmental voice take over. Um, becoming uncomfortable. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with being uncomfortable in my own skin because it's taught me how to get comfortable, but not sharing that with anyone. Um, secrets, right? I spent most of my life, pardon me, I spent most of my life thinking that I was fucked up for the way that I thought. And I still think fucked up, but I share it and I'm open about it, you know? And almost every single person in my life is an addict in recovery. Um, and so when I share them and they're like, oh, yeah, it's, it takes away the power. Right. And so it's staying connected. And that's really, I think, what I stopped doing was staying connected with people. I started hiding again.
That makes sense. Do you journal at all,
No,
or have you?
I'm not gonna lie. No, I don't. It's one of those things where other people talk about it or I see it and I'm like, oh, I should really do that, and I get down on myself. But no, I don't, honestly.
Hey, to each your own, right? Yeah. Like the only time I really put pen to paper is if I'm really fucked up in the head,
Yeah.
And then I heard somebody once say too, when you go to journal, do it in cursive because it will open up like 10,000 neural pathways.
Hmm.
Printing will do like 5,000 or 2,000, and then like journaling on your phone is like two. So yeah, so I have to when I get really squirrely or really messed up, I have to put pen to paper myself.
Hmm.
Um, what does self care look like to you?
Um, for me, it's really alone time. It can be very basic, just watching TV, reading, um, walking my dogs. I have 3 dogs, so I'm constantly walking dogs. Um, like I work with a lot of using addicts. I'm a housing worker with the inner city, um, and I'm very very involved in my fellowship. I do a lot of service, and so a lot of my life is just drugs, alcohol, disaster, dying, all that kind of stuff, constantly, all the time. So anything that I can do where I can almost just clear my mind is self care to me. And like Netflix is the greatest thing ever.
If you can actually find something good to watch on. I spend more time watching previews than I do actually watching. Maybe my attention span's like a minute and a half,
But
right?
even that I find it's okay because I'm not in a place of worry. I'm not in a place of problem solving. I'm not, I think it goes back to when I was a kid and reading, right? I get to be off in a fantasy world and I'm not, I don't know. I feel like I'm on all the time and when I get to I don't know, something about walking my dogs specifically and watching mindless TV specifically is when my mind just gets to go blank.
Yeah, no, I get it. Like when I want to wind down after a stressful day or something, or I just want to say fuck it, put the TV on and just like relax, put the phone away where you can't see it, and
Mm-hmm.
just live in that moment and wind down, right? So I get that. Um, what was I gonna say here? I'll ask you this one. Who's somebody you'd like to meet and why?
Who's somebody I'd like to meet? Well, it's gonna sound really cheesy because it's so recovery related, but and I almost got to meet him about 3 years ago. But there's a fellow in AA named Earl Hightower. I don't know if you've ever heard
That
of
name
him.
sounds familiar.
Um, he I got to hear him speak in Los Angeles about 3 years ago, but me and a couple people snuck into this AA round, so we had to get out really fast. Um, I think only because in my mind he's like this big presence and like this AA celebrity, and I need to see that he's just a regular person, and because his story is like mind blowing. Um, but I think, yeah, just for that reason, just to see, I've seen pictures of him and stuff, and he's like this just short little white guy, and he sounds like this bigger than life person when you hear him on tape, and I remember the first time when I came into recovery, I used to hear other people's stories, and they sounded so big and so crazy, and people talking about needles in alleys and stuff like that, and I spent a lot of time thinking that um maybe I'm not really one of you, but I am, and I need to remember that, right? And so when I meet somebody who just looks like a regular Joe, and just shares the feelings, then I know that I belong here.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was 21 when I came in, and I had to learn to identify, not compare, because yeah, all the people were old boys, lost the house, the marriage, all that. I never had anything to lose, you
Right?
know. But yeah, I never had any of that stuff to lose. Gonna ask you a couple more questions here. Um, what motivates you to stay sober today?
um I don't want to ever wake up in a drunk tank again. um that was the last time I woke up hungover, was in a drunk tank. I don't ever want to do that again. um I feel like I got my chance at relapse, and although I probably didn't take full advantage of it, I got my chance, you know, and it's my job to give back. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't have that luxury anymore. Yeah.
Fair enough. I like to ask this one too. You got any life mottos or little sayings you live by?
I hope this works. No, not really. No.
Okay,
No. I'm not even really big on a lot of the slogans and stuff like that. They don't feel natural coming out of my mouth.
fair enough. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like little stuff personally, right? Like,
Yeah.
I needed it, right? Like I bite-sized stuff that I can digest, or keep it simple. And just for today, one of my mottos, and I've said this one lots, is fear is the edge of your comfort zone, and on the other side of it is growth. And I just have to push
Hmm.
myself, right? Uh,
Although my friends will say I say that's what she said an awful lot.
oh yeah, I can just imagine what that all relates to. um, okay. Last question.
Sure.
What do your friendships look like? You know,
Wow. I have some amazing, amazing friendships today. Um, they just blow my mind. Like I said, I just celebrated 6 years, and I was crying like a baby at at the meeting because I'm looking around the room at all these people who just mean so much to me, like just so much, and in so many different ways, and I don't have family. I haven't spoken to my mother or father in quite a few years. I have my children, um, but I don't have you know blood family. But man, the family that I've chosen, or that's chosen me, it's just insane, and I when I don't know, I get my husband's funeral, for example, right? When he died, and the people that came to the funeral, and I realized how many people were there to just help me, and just be there for me. And um, it absolutely blows my mind. And I still get those feelings of like I'm not worthy and I don't deserve it, but I do, you know. Yeah, I gotta block out that voice, but I definitely do. There's some really fucking amazing people in my life.
That's awesome. Yeah, sometimes I have to think like, um, when it comes to that, like if I ever struggle reaching out or asking for help, I have to ask myself the question, if somebody reached out to me, would I help them, right?
Yeah,
And if the answer is yes, then I have to let somebody help me.
right?
That's how I gauge it, and it's very rare I've ever said fuck no, I wouldn't help that person. So why wouldn't I let somebody help me, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that pretty much wraps up our time.
Okay.
What's something we haven't talked about or touched on that you would love to leave the listeners? You want to take us home?
Oh boy, that's a big one. Um, I think because I see it so often, especially in work, and I've had quite a few friends relapsing lately, is, for those people who are like struggling and thinking that people don't understand, or you don't want to bother people, whether we're sober or not sober, and no matter what it is, like fucking bother people, you know? Um, I don't know anybody who can make it through this life like completely on their own, besides the Unabomber, which says a lot. Um, we're human beings. We're not meant to be alone. And it there's a lot of strength in reaching out and saying I need help, you know. And then I always share this too when I go do panels, H&I panels or whatever. Um, reach out and ask for help, but then accept the help, right? Because sometimes we reach out and then we shrivel up again. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that pretty much wraps us up. So I want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your time, your truth with us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for inviting me.
And for everybody else out there listening, same way I leave you every episode, make lots of memories, take lots of pics, and show the world your smile.